Hi there! Yes, it is I, the conspicuous Moo, back once again in the new year with another Brewmaster video. And today I thought, fresh start, 2021, let's have a look at the Brewmaster and do a bit of brainstorming, see if we can improve it. A few tweaks here and there, a few bit of revolutionary things as well. Let's get cracking. Now, when you think about a Brewmaster, what is the first thing that everyone thinks of? Cheese! No, it's Stagger. Now, we do have a little bit of an issue with Stagger at the moment, and I have a few suggestions on how to fix that. So, Stagger at the moment is granted by Shuffle, which gives you 100% of your base Stagger while it's up, and it's not difficult to maintain, and that's fabulous. However, because at the moment, at our lower gear levels, that our base Stagger is rather low, 100% of our rather low is not all that terrific. I'm looking at around about 60% Stagger, which is significantly lower than it was when I had Ironskin Brew. Now, I don't think anyone's really going to be missing Ironskin Brew a great deal, but it did have the advantage of bumping up your Stagger level significantly. Because we don't really have anything to replace that, and Celestial Brew is another topic, it does mean that instead of 80% Stagger, it's 60%. And that means that you are taking an awful lot less into your Stagger dot and an awful lot more to the face. And that kind of needs to be compensated somehow. Now, if your Stagger is generally lower, we are a low health and a low armor spec, in tanking terms anyway. So you would need to, compensate us in some way by increasing those. Because otherwise, yeah, you'll get into the situation where we are now, which is that we get hit so hard, even though we're supposed to be great at staggering physical damage, that we are kiting at much lower level mythic keys than we normally would expect. Part of the problem, I think, anyway, is the way that Stagger is tied to agility. Now, at the moment, eye level is king because primary stats are far more valuable to us, but the other problem with it is that because we are starting from low gear levels, we start with low Stagger levels as a direct result. And there's no real way of increasing our Stagger in any way, shape or form. We just have to put higher eye level gear on, so yes, by the end of the expansion we may well be Stagger gods, but right now it kinda sucks. What I would prefer to do is switch it around so that Stagger is Mastery instead. Mastery seems to make sense because it is the ability that everyone associates with Brewmasters in the first place. It's the first thing they think of, well, apart from cheese, and it's also something that we can directly influence. If you wanted to go for a Mastery heavy and therefore Stagger heavy build, you could always go after certain pieces of gear and build it that way. So, but if we're going to put Stagger onto Mastery, then what becomes of Elusive Brawler? What becomes of the dodge component? Well, I will get to that, but for now I would give Agility the ability for greater attack power and for additional armor as well, which is something that it has had historically in the past. And so now we move on to the problems with Purifying Brew in its modern form. Now, I don't think many people would really argue too much about, Ironskin Brew going away. It wasn't particularly interesting. A maintenance buff didn't cost you anything. You just had to keep it up all the time. Not particularly exciting active mitigation in progress there. However, the new paradigm, which is the use your Purifying Brew, get stacks, apply to Celestial Brew on cooldown, is that really any different? I mean, nobody's really saving them or soaking them up. You don't want to do that. You're wasting your mitigating potential if you do so. So we're just hitting these on cooldown anyway. How is that massively different from Ironskin Brew in the first place? There's also the impact of the new Purifying Brew as well. I mean, for a start, Bob and Weave as a talent is just rendered completely useless because you are now purifying so often that there's never a Stagger dot high enough that would justify taking that talent over the other options in that row. Plus, these days when you are purifying, it's not necessarily because you've got a lot of Stagger down, but because you're creating stacks for Celestial Brew, which is not the point of Purifying Brew in the first place. So, you're now hitting ability when that's not really what its intended original purpose was. So I think Purifying Brew is trying to do too much at once, and the whole combination of reducing your Stagger dot plus creating stacks for Celestial Brew is too much, and they don't gel particularly well. so you know, we need to bring Purifying Brew back to basics. So sort of decouple it away from Celestial Brew and let Celestial Brew, or Guard, whatever you want to call it, have its own role over here, and keep Purifying Brew as to what it's supposed to be doing, which is reducing your stagger dot, which is, you know, part of the challenge of being a brewmaster in the first place. So this is how I would probably go about it. First of all, you might have noticed as a brewmaster that energy for the most part does not matter as part of your rotation. You're very unlikely to run out of energy, except in two very exceptional circumstances. The first one is that you're using Charred Passions and you're using it very aggressively and using Spinning Crank Kick a lot. You can possibly run out of energy for Keg Smash then. Or the second one is that you've had some sort of episode and you're flailing around in your keyboard hitting Tiger Palm all of the time instead of any of your other abilities. Either way, you know, energy really isn't that much of an issue. It's not a very important resource and it doesn't really have much impact on what we do. Chi, on the other hand, yes, controversial opinion incoming, did have an impact. And, you know, I think it might be entirely possible to switch energy out and just bring Chi in. So, you know, you would have your standard, it would be a standard build and spend, but it would be with a resource which is very monkish in nature, is already used by one of our specs in Windwalker, and, you know, is harking back to a more fundamental brewmaster type of build. So things like Blackout Kick, Tiger Palm, also Expel Harm, would be ones that would create Chi, and then your spenders would be in your mitigation. So Purifying Brew would be now by itself and actually clear off Stagger when you need it to, instead of just creating stacks for the hell of it. Then Celestial Brew, you could spend your Chi on that, and you know, you'd have your magic damage mitigation in place there. We're talking something that's going to be, you know, not one enormous bubble every 30 to 35 seconds, but something that's a little bit shorter, you know, maybe a larger amount per, depending on how much Chi you have when you actually use it. And then the third one would be Elusive Brew, which is, you know, another callback to another ability that we used to have as Brewmasters that was taken away. But, you know, that's where the old mastery would go. It would go into Elusive Brew, which would enable you to, you know, greatly increase the chance of you dodging. And you would probably, you know, it would be Chi tied to the amount of seconds, basically. So, you know, 3 Chi, 3 seconds. Or whatever. I'm just spitballing here. But, you know, now you've got an interesting choice. Now you can purify a stagger if it's high. You can use Guard or Celestial Brew, whatever you like to call it. Or you can increase your dodge chance substantially. So, you know, now that is an interesting choice. You've now got a situation where you're not using Purifying Brew just to make Celestial Brew stacks and all that nonsense. It's now its own thing in its own right, as it was intended to be. With the Elusive Brew, we don't really want to get into a situation where, you know, we can cheese entire raid mechanics because we can just hit Elusive Brew and just dodge everything and give them the finger while we're doing it. You know, I believe Kill Jaden would have a few words to say about that. So I would say that, you know, if an attack is not dodgeable, it's an ability that is not dodgeable, and you do have to be hit, then perhaps, you know, if it is a melee physical attack, then it would be a glancing blow, so it wouldn't hit you as hard as a regular melee attack would. Now that I've completely revolutionized the rotation with Chi and new abilities and stuffs, as one does, it's time to look at the talents and get rid of some of the clutter. Now, in terms of clutter, I think Clash is probably top of the table. It's an odd ability to have brought back in the first place because they couldn't make it work in the original iteration, and it's not working particularly well now. It's an ability that, you know, still 6-7 weeks into Shadowlands, I don't remember how to use. You know, oh yeah, I do have Clash, and it is on my bar. It's just not very good. I think it's time for either Rushing Jade Wind or Spinning Crank Kick to go away. Now, my personal preference is to keep Spinning Crank Kick, and the reason for that is that Rushing Jade Wind is has a sort of Iron Skin Brew problem where you just sort of hit it every 8 seconds and it spins around and does damage and looks very pretty. But, you know, we can do pretty, we'll just get a glyph and makes you do that every time you Spinning Crank Kick or whatever. But Spinning Crank Kick is something you can use on demand, and would obviously now cost Chi instead of energy. But, you know, that would be another choice that you could make as an AoE option. Zen Meditation is still rubbish. Rubbish. I mean, it's nice that you're able to move now while you can Zen meditate, but, you know, if we wanted a little more group utility, then, you know, making that a raid cooldown where if you're meditating and, you know, everyone's taking 10% less damage for 8 seconds, or something like that, you know. So if you're going through a high AoE damage phase, you can just go off to the side, try not to be hit in the face, because that would still break it, but, you know, for a 5-minute cooldown, you know, you could pull a rabbit out of a hat there. Chi Wave in the first talent is, well, I mean, you know, I think if you've watched any of these videos before, you know what I think of Chi Wave. I would change it back to Zen Pulse. Now, Zen Pulse is an interesting ability where you sort of, I think it was every 15 seconds or so, you could just go boom around yourself, and it would shoot out, and you would do damage and a little bit of healing to your colleagues as well. So great in melee situations and stuff. Does a little bit of damage. Probably not as much as Chi Burst, so, you know, if you could get more out of Chi Burst, you get more damage, but you have to do the cast, so, you know, that's the trade-off. But, you know, Zen Pulse is like an instant cast. Spitfire, I've always wanted to get rid of Spitfire. I really have. I was thinking something along the lines of Chi Explosion. Now, not the original Chi Explosion, which was immensely complicated, and depending on how much Chi you used at the time, it would stack up in different abilities. I'm just thinking of something a little more offensive. You know, if you've got Light Brewing and Black Ox Brew there as well, it's like as options. But, you know, if you wanted to go fully offensive, you know, you just, you know, running a few low mythics for your mates or something, and you just want to do as much damage as possible, Chi Explosion could be an option. Now, we could either use it as, you know, you build up your Chi and you use that instead, but I would prefer to keep that more along the mitigation line. The other option, of course, is, you know, all the orbs that you generate, and usually to expel harm, you could turn into Chi Explosion instead, so it would be an additional button, and, you know, the size of the explosion around you would depend on the amount of healing spheres that suddenly turn deadly. Tiger Tail Sweep is rubbish. I was thinking it was kind of a new ability, really, so like a deep harmony. So throw it over. Now, you remember when Ring of Peace used to disarm things? I was thinking something like that. So kind of like Ring of Peace, on the same line, but has the ability to disarm and silence for a short amount of time. And it would be a targeting reticule as well. It wouldn't be too far. Probably about the same range as Ring of Peace is. But, you know, if you had a whole bunch of custom mobs who were causing a bit of trouble, you could chuck that over there, shut them up, and then they would come towards you, you know, that sort of thing. And, you know, if you've got a lot of melee as well, and they're all up in your face, and you're taking quite a lot of hits, you could deep harmony them, disarm them for a few seconds, give your healer time to recover. Special Delivery to Dizzying Haze, easy choice, because Special Delivery has no control over it. You know, the barrels just go up and they come down, and they might hit what you want. Dizzying Haze was a very original ability in way back in Mists of Pandora, way back when. Had a 40-yard range, and you'd chuck it out, and it would generate threat, and it would slow all of your enemies as well. Wonderful kiting tool, so, you know, in those necrotic weeks, or, you know, you're just taking too much damage, or you just want to slow everyone down to annoy them, you could take Dizzying Haze on that row, and that would be your option for that particular week. Rushing Jade Wind would float away. And I would go with something like Whirling Feathers. Now, this is another one that I've completely made up off the top of my head, but basically it just enhances Spinning Crane Kick a little, and I was thinking along the lines of, you know, that while you're channeling Spinning Crane Kick, you will slow down the attack or casting speed of any mobs caught within it. That's, you know, more of a dungeony thing. And, you know, it probably, you know, it wouldn't work on raid bosses and stuff like that, but, you know, it would have the ability to, you know, it would be mitigation through slowing down other people's attacks. So that was just my thought along those lines. Bottom line is pretty okay at the moment with Blackout combo. You know, it does mildly complicate the rotation, so I would want a bigger payoff for that, and, you know, on single target I would like to bring the Tiger Palm bonus up to 300%. You know, no one's taken the legendary power, but, you know, let's make it, you know, actually worthwhile, worth taking if you really want to pump out the single target. Let's go back to those good old Legion days of the face palm. Summary time! Right, so, yeah, that's a lot of ideas just thrown off the top of my head, and I'm just chucking ideas around, and, you know, I would like to hear what you have to actually think of it. You know, would you like to go back to Chi? Was that the worst idea ever? You know, would you like a bit of Chi Explosion? Have you got some alternative ideas? So the talent section was basically to take the majority of the talent tree, and we'll keep most of it, but introduce some talents which would be competitive with the other ones in that row, because there are a number of rows where it's just like such an obvious choice at the moment. I would like to turn to Chi Chi Chi. It is our nature. I really like the idea of having 3 different sets of brews, all doing separate different things, being a brewmaster. You make those choices, and if you make the wrong choice, well, then that's probably going to hurt you. If you hit elusive brew and someone's casting something into your face, then there will be a penalty for that. Maybe you should have chosen guard. Did I say guard? I meant celestial brew. On my character sheet at the moment it says I have 3% parry. I don't think I've ever seen myself actually parry anything, because we don't usually have our weapons out. But if we could add that to shuffle, that we have the ability to parry things as well. We are martial artists. We should be able to, those things with the spikes and sort of things that are lodging. I think we should be able to parry. But anyway, that's it. That is the video. Lots of ideas tumbling around in my head. But it would be really important for me to have some feedback as well, because I'll chuck. I have no problem chucking these ideas over Twitter until they ban me and saying stop making stupid suggestions. But I do like to poke them every once in a while and say, could you get the monk class designer out of the cupboard? I've got a few ideas for him. Because it's early days in the expansion, another patch, and all of a sudden things could change a little. Never hurts to ask. So do like and comment and moose and subscribe, and moo once more for luck. And I hope you had a good new year, and there will be much more to come from the Conspicuous Moo. But until then, until the next episode, I am the Conspicuous Moo, and a very good afternoon to you.